Hey everyone, this is Cerulean. Welcome to my channel. In this video, I'll be reviewing the new Archer and Olive Watercolor A5 Dot Grid Journal Notebook. For years now, I've been wanting a dot grid journal where I can paint my watercolors in without warping, without the colors seeping into the paper. And so, when I saw the notebook announced on the Archer and Olive newsletter, I just thought that I had to try this. Before we continue with my thoughts, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to this channel for any future video updates. Now, the notebook runs for $50 on the website, so I contacted them and I said, hey, I'm a watercolorist, I have 150 followers on Instagram. Is there any way you can give me a discount, because $50 is a little steep for me and I didn't really expect anything, but well, you never know until you try, right? And so they replied back and gave me a 20% discount, and that was good enough for me. It covered the shipping as well, so here I am now reviewing this. So what you've been seeing here were my Instagram posts of my first impressions when I got the notebook. And as you saw, I did a full page test with a wet-on-wet technique to see how well the paper can handle water and see whether or not it will buckle. And then I did more tests with thumbnails with more wet and wet techniques, wet on dry, mixing the paint on the paper instead of mixing the paint in the pan, as well as re-wetting, lifting, and softening and glazing. And then I took my Arches hot press 300 GSM paper and compared it with the Archer and Olive 200 GSM hot press paper. And before I forget, both papers are actually 100% cotton, which is really good for watercolor. And as you can see here, Archer and Olive's paper from Paul Rubin performed pretty well against Arches. So you don't see the paper test anymore, but I'm still gonna go through it just because I think that there are some pros and cons to both papers, but the Archer and Olive did pretty well against Arches, so obviously it's not quite a one-to-one comparison, but fairly close, just because it's really hard to find 200 GSM paper in the watercolor world. Usually you get 185 GSM, 300 GSM, or 640 GSM. I know Arches has a bit more variety, but usually those are the three most common paper weight you will find. If you want to know more about paper and weight, please let me know in the comments below so I could talk more about them, because they are a completely different topic here. Anyway, getting back to the test here, between the two papers, I didn't find anything that was significantly different between the two that was alarming to me. It was a gradient test that made a significant difference for me. The single gradient was fine. You had to work a little bit harder on the Archer and Olive to get it to get a nice even layer transition there. But when you try to do the two color gradient, it was a little more trickier. And if you went back to the thumbnails there, you can kind of see what happened. It was so much easier on the Arches paper. I didn't have to work for it, and it just blended beautifully together. But for the Archer and Olive, it was a little harder, not impossible. And so I think that if you were to do a two-color gradient, you want to be mindful of the amount of water you're using. I wasn't using that much, but maybe I did. I don't know. But I think it wasn't that much, but still the end was a little hard to get an even tone. Similar to the single flat wash, I found that glazing was fine on both papers. If I had to choose, I think that the Arches was a tad little bit better. I don't know why, it's just my personal preference. But you know what I really liked about the Archer and Olive paper was that it was really easy to lift. I know that for some reason, in my experience, it's a lot harder to lift from hot press paper, especially darker pigments, but it was really easy to lift from the Archer and Olive paper than it was from Arches. So that's one really nice thing to know, just because I do a lot of lifting, especially with clouds, and it's really hard to do clouds, moody clouds on Arches paper, just because it's so hard to lift. But as for shadows and spears. I thought that both paper did fine. Both each have their merits. I like the one on Arches better because I just feel like it's a lot smoother. But it's not impossible on the Archer and Olive. And you know what? Honestly, it looks it's workable. It's not like it's impossible, and you can smooth it out if you wanted to. So all in all, Arches does a lot better with gradients, but Archer and Olive is really good at doing lifting techniques. So take it for what it's worth, I suppose. Obviously, this Archer and Olive watercolor paper test wouldn't be complete without an illustration. So of course I went ahead and picked out a piece of art that I had on hand that I was gonna paint eventually, but I never got around to do it. But so then I figured, why we might as well test it out here and see how it works out, right? I don't know if you can tell. I'm sorry. I must have forgotten to lock the focus on the art, so now it's out of focusing in and out of my hands. But once that's done, you can see that color-wise, there's no real difference, and that's great because even earlier on the uh, test, I didn't see any significant uh, I didn't see that arches had better vibrancy than Arch and Olive. And for me, that's great because whether I want to admit it or not, I think that I just love color and vibrancy. I mean, I love looking at monochrome or looking at moody paintings or even pastels. But somehow when I paint, I end up with really colorful art. And the more vibrant it is, the happier I am. So I'm just really happy that even though there's some pros and cons between these two papers, at the end of the day, I still have my vibrant colors and I love it. Blending wise, I didn't feel like one was harder than the other. Again, probably Arches was easier just because, it's Arches. But the texture turned out just as beautiful and the blending just turned out just as beautifully as Arches did. If I were to nitpick, I would say that it was a little harder to blend in the cool shadows into the girl's arm, just because Arch and Olive seems to dry even faster than the Arch's paper. But then again, that's hot press for you. They dry really fast, but it's especially faster on the Arch and Olive. So if you don't have any patience for drying time, this paper might actually work out for you, but for someone like me who likes to do with techniques, I have to work even faster. So it's a good and bad thing. It's up to you. But I think for Archer and Olive, which and the demographic that they're aiming for, it's actually a good thing. Of course, I say that, but then I have a feeling someone's gonna come along and say, Cerulean, what are you talking about? The drying time is extremely long. And, for someone who doesn't use watercolor often, it probably is really long for you, but for me who likes my paper wet longer, no. It is far too fast for me. So, the best way to know if the drying time is fast or slow for you is to try it out yourself. Archer and Olive's 200 GSM paper actually held up water a lot better than I expected it. Now, for the record, I do not work with anything lower than 300 GSMs. Like I said, I use a lot of wet on wet techniques. So for a 90-pound, 185 GSM paper, that just isn't gonna be possible because what happen is that you end up with a lot of warping or a lot of wrinkles. Now, if I was working with wet and dry techniques, that wouldn't really be a problem. And even though you don't see it here, I did not use anything to hold down the Archer and Olive paper. I just painted it straight on. And to my surprise, it actually did not buckle. I mean, obviously when you put water on anything, it's gonna buckle, but when it dried pretty flat, and I was very surprised and very impressed. This 200 GSM paper is actually really good. And truth be told, if this was actually 300 GSM, you wouldn't end up with 120 sheets. In fact, you'll probably end up with 100 sheets or less. And for bullet journals, that amount would have been too small. Besides, the watercolor book is pretty thick. It is actually a lot thicker than their other journals. I mean, I measured it and it looks like it's about 3 centimeters thick, which is a little bit over an inch. So it's actually pretty big. If there's one room for improvement, I would like to have the option to not have it be spiral bound. And that's just because I tend to be pretty rough with my notebooks. I just toss it in my backpack or in my bag and I go. And my rings always end up bent in odd ways somehow, some way, no matter how careful I try to be with it. So if we could have a hardbound stitched watercolor notebook, I'd be pretty happy. And I can see why they chose not to do that, because I just don't see how it would have stuck. You know, I mean, like, I don't know how the sheets would have stuck to the notebook without them falling out every which way. So I could see why they chose that option. But yeah, at the same time, if possible, I would like to see that sometime in the future. So, as a final verdict, is this watercolor notebook by Archer and Olive worth it? Is it worth $50? Absolutely. You cannot find a better value than this, because for 120 pages for $50 at A5 size, which is 5.75 inches by 8.25 inches, you're looking at 41 cents per sheet. Now, if you were to compare that with the Arches watercolor pad on the Blick website, which is 11.7 by 16.5 inches, that's basically two A5 sizes put together. And they're asking for $21.03 for 12 sheets. So if you were to have the 12 sheets, you would get 24 sheets. So that's 88 cents a sheet. If you went with Archer and Olive, you're saving twice as much. 41 cents for an A5 size paper, especially since it's 100% cotton, is a very affordable option. Artists who paint with watercolor, this is an option for you too. You don't have to bullet journal to use this. Of course, the dot grid is still there, but if you're using this just to sketch or travel with, this is a very affordable option that I would recommend you look into, especially if you can ignore the dots on the page. Alright, that's it. Thank you so much for watching this video to the very end. I really appreciate you being here. Remember to subscribe and hit the like button, and I'll see you next time in my next video.